Hey everybody, welcome back to the Natatorium Knowledge Channel. I am your host, Eric Knight with Arenda, and today our special guest here is Justin Caron. He's one of the principals of Aquatic Design Group, and as we always have on here, we try to get the most qualified subject matter experts, and Justin's one of the better designers in the world that I know anyway. So he designs not just indoor, but any type of commercial swimming pool, fountains. What else do you design, Justin?
Basically, with anything with recreational water. So from large scale water parks to interactive splash pads to decorative fountains, and then of course our bread and butter is the municipal, the high school, the higher education facility. Could be one body water, could be multiple bodies of water.
And roughly how many years have you been designing swimming pools?
I've been with Aquatic Design Group since 2005.
Okay, awesome. So little other known fact, Justin Caron was also a competitive swimmer just like I was, and we actually swam for the same coach. So he's qualified in that regard. So without further ado, Justin, I'm gonna ask you the question. It's all about money, right? How can commercial swimming pool facilities save money? And let's start with in the design phase.
Okay, so the first thing we do when we're talking about a facility is of course programming. So proper programming up front is going to inform all those decisions that lead to right sizing components, proper layouts, and efficiencies. There's two ways to attack profitability. One is to reduce your expenses. The other is to increase your profitability. In an ideal world, the cases or the decisions we make early on help us to allow the operator to be as lean, as efficient, and as maintenance-free as possible. On the other side, we need the operator to help us understand how they intend to use the facility, what their intended purpose is. For instance, if this is a multi-purpose pool, but it's really being driven by, let's say, swim lessons and group classes, therapy classes, then that's a very important thing to know early on so that we can maximize those small group spaces, that shallow water and that warm water, and kind of, I don't want to say push the other stuff to the side, but incorporate that around your core tenant. And your core tenant, right, in that case would be your revenue driving programs.
So is it in your experience that the swim lessons are the revenue driver in most facilities, or what else?
If done properly, swim lessons are your number one revenue source. I mean, that's 1,000 swim schools have popped up around the country in the last couple of years, and these are small spaces and strip malls, and they can work anywhere because it's a life skill, right? Parents care about their kids; they want their kids to learn to swim.
Yeah, actually, the gift that I'm giving my niece, who's about to turn 2 for her second birthday, is a package of survival swimming lessons.
Sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
good uncle.
Yeah, well, it's what little I can do, but I hope that it matters. And I was fortunate that I didn't take those kind of lessons growing up, but my mom took us into the swimming pool from birth, basically. So every summer from when I was an infant, we were in the water, we were getting underwater, we were getting comfortable with it. I've never been afraid of water, and I know a lot of people are. So profitability, that's awesome. So from a design standpoint, if I can distill this, you're saying make sure you design it for programming so that it's not just profitable. What aspects are going to make it, I guess this is a kind of a side question, what's going to reduce expenses in the design process?
Yeah, so in the design process, excluding soft costs and design fees, right? But if you're talking about and even capital costs, if we're talking about our ongoing expenses, so say you have a $10 million project, we designed our $10 million project, the $10 million project gets built. And 10 million is a large facility in a lot of ways, but if it's an indoor natatorium, you got all the building and stuff around it, so it's not like
it's not that large. Yeah.
So you just use 10 million. If that's your budget, we designed that. The second thing that we really want to focus on is your systems, right? And those are going to differ on indoor, natatoriums versus an outdoor facility. Your outdoor costs are pretty linear. You've got your water surface area, and that's where 95 to 98% of your water use, chemical use, heat loss, etc. is going to happen. It's right there. So the first thing we want to do is we want to right size the pools to accommodate your programs, but not be oversized with a bunch of dead space. That also goes hand in hand with being able to lay out those pools so that you can minimize the number of guards that it takes to operate a facility. For
Yeah,
instance,
because
if you have a
personnel,
lazy,
like
what's that?
personnel is a big expense, right? Because
Exactly.
most,
Yeah.
it's not just chemicals. It's like you have to hire these people to actually guard the place. That makes sense. I never thought about that.
Yeah. So if you have say just a pie chart, 100% of your expenses,
Mhm.
right off the bat, on average, 60 to 70% are staff related. So if we have a lazy river with a vortex in the middle,
Mhm.
we've got blind spots that were just created, right? So we've got to put a guard here on one side, we got to put a guard here, and then we've got to put a guard so they can see inside that vortex area, because you've got to raise them wall where a body or head can disappear underwater and not be seen. So if we can move that from the center of the pool to the side of the pool, now you've eliminated one of those guards instantly.
So it may
So
cost about the same from a construction standpoint, but it can save you a lifeguard on staff.
Right. And this is one of the stats that I like to throw out. If we can eliminate one temporary position, right? So one lifeguard, and not that, I mean, we're all for employment and having
Sure.
job equity, et cetera. But if we can eliminate the need for one guard over a 5-year process, you just bought yourself a second pool. So a small pool. When you're talking about an average expense of a part-time person, once you get training, benefits, et cetera, plus their salary involved, you're looking at around $50,000 a year. So if you multiply that by 5 years, and then you add in some escalation, we're looking around $300,000 to get you a second body of water. If we look at this from a full-time position, not only now you're getting a second body of water, but you're also getting a water slide. Right. So if again, staffing is incredibly important when we're programming pools, laying them out to help do things in the right fashion. Go ahead.
Well, what about designing for the actual mechanical equipment of a pool, the filtration and stuff? Does it make sense to design up? Is there any efficiency advantage? Because now I want to evolve this into, let's talk about operating costs. We talked about design. What can you design? And then let's evolve that conversation to operating costs, because you just talked about staff. There are other operating costs. And let's avoid HVAC, because I have, you're on the water side of things. I already interviewed some people about HVAC in other videos. So let's stay focused on the pool and the water. And how do we reduce operating costs?
So you attacked staffing, we talked about that. Second thing is to make sure you can add pool covers. Pool covers will reduce your operating expenses, again, because 96% of those expenses in terms of utilities are at water service level. So as you know, from being a swimmer, probably a lifeguard, probably been in a lot of facilities where you've had to take those on, take them off. They are literally a pain in the butt, right?
Oh, they're horrible.
They're
I was going to say, man, where are you going with this? Because I don't like pool covers.
And they're also a safety risk. I mean, there's been lots of cases where people have disappeared putting these on, and they find them the next day. So, but we have to facilitate that process. So we have to lay out the support spaces where those pool covers are going to be stored, ideally not on your deck, so that they're easy to get on the deck, get the pool covers on, get the pool covers off, and get back off deck. If this is something where because you're looking at a 20-foot reel that doesn't corner, right? It's a rigid reel. So if you're looking at taking tight corners, doesn't work very well. So that would be something, properly informing those support spaces and adjacencies. To answer your question directly, though, on the mechanical side, one of the most important things you can do is make educated decisions with your chemicals. So if you, for instance, there are lots of fingers in the pies of distribution channels for chemicals, right? There's the manufacturer, there's a distributor, there's a delivery company. Sometimes there's 2 distributors. So you could look at a base cost of liquid chlorine is going to be less expensive per unit and more effective than tablet chlorine any day of the week. However, if we have a situation or scenario where the distribution channel on the liquid side is 2 to 3 times, more
markup,
greedy, or exactly. So maybe tablets a better scenario. Or if you're in a situation where you have seasonal use, tablets better scenario because it's got a better half-life, right?
And you can ship them.
Right, exactly.
Chlorine is heavy.
And there's less ergonomic and spill issues with tablet than liquid.
Right.
So again, we need to look at those things individually at each facility, and then make informed decisions on our actual chemical use. Then we want to look at how the chemicals interplay with each other, right? In a perfect world, you've got something to pull and push that alkalinity and pH in every system. So if I was going to tell you a perfect facility in a vacuum where we had no safety concerns, you'd have gas chlorine, you'd have CO2, and you'd have muriatic acid. right? Now, as we all know, gas chlorine is probably not going to happen, in 2020 in many facilities. There's a lot of risks involved there.
Well, you just listed 3 things that will lower the pH of a pool.
Potentially, yeah, right. But they all play together. I don't know what your source water is. I don't know, there's a lot of other factors there, right?
Well, I guess, if you're using gas chlorine, because gas chlorine is extremely acidic, CO2, when you add CO2 to water, that lowers the pH directly. Yeah. It actually raises your alkalinity over time, which is odd. We can go into that a little later. It is weird, but it does happen. And then the third thing you said was muriatic acid. So that's to quell the alkalinity rise. Most commercial pools don't actually really need to use a lot of soda ash or bicarb. True. A lot of people don't know that. But for those of you watching, physics is on your side here. Physics will actually raise your pH slightly over time, thanks to Henry's law. But continue. I didn't mean to interject.
No, it's fine.
Well, I meant to interject. I didn't mean to interrupt. I should say that. Yeah.
It's good framing too. I just left a facility last week in Winnemucca, Nevada, where they have gas chlorine, and because of the facts you just mentioned, they just hand feed as they need to once a week, once every 2 weeks to control alkalinity and pH, because gas chlorine is it's a beautiful thing, but it also kills people. Right?
I just saw a story. I don't know how it's still legal in the United States, but if it is used correctly, it's the most badass chlorine you can have.
True. Yeah. So in most cases, we're really looking at 3 things, whether that's a liquid, a sodium hypochlorite, we're gonna have to edit that out because I just ate my tongue.
You just said sodium hypochlorite, man. It's human. We're all human. As smart as you are, we all flub our words, Justin.
Yeah. So cal hypo, sodium, or a liquid chlorine system, or a liquid, saline generation system, saltwater generation system. Those are not on an indoor pool, buddy. I'm gonna put my foot down on that. Yeah. So those are the 3 things that we're asked. Okay, yeah. That's true. Yeah, that is a source of chlorine, as it's site-generated chlorine, but indoor pools, my own opinion, salt pools are not appropriate indoors, but that's my opinion, not necessarily Justin's. That being said, so operating costs, let's talk more mechanical equipment. Can secondary systems help operating costs? They can, yeah. In fact, it's something we highly recommend. UV is still the most common secondary means of disinfectant in the industry. UV is going to raise your electricity costs. It's frankly going to raise your chemical use as well. It may prevent the number of times you have to shock, but what we're doing with the secondary systems isn't necessarily creating a better residual. It's to prevent those recreational water illnesses and to prevent some of those snowball effects from happening. So another thing that's gained a lot of popularity in the United States is AOP systems. In the past, we saw a lot of ozone systems. Those have kind of evolved to be a little bit more dynamic now with AOP systems. There's, with every system, whether that's, tablet or liquid chlorine, whether that's UV, whether it's AOP, some people are going to love them, some people are going to hate them, and it depends on your experience. But those systems can, in theory, to your point, do, and not only in theory, but in practice, really help control your chemical costs. I saw a stat, and I forget where it was, that there was a city that did an audit of their 27 or 26 pools, and over a quarter of their chemical expenses were tied directly to shocking. Right. So if we can prevent, because they were shocking once a week, whether they
that makes sense, because breakpoint chlorination, that means they had a lot of nitrogen getting in that pool somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, those secondary systems can help control that, as can some other things that you can add, some of the things that your company does in terms of preventing those, whether that's there's a lot of different enzyme systems, but where we see the most efficacy, or where we hear from the most people that they work well, is obviously a startup, right? When your plaster is curing, they can help a ton there. With aging systems, or systems where you haven't changed your median, your filter, say high-rate sand filter, attacking the things that grow and fill in all the molecules, and trying not to get too technical.
We'll just call it the organic waste. We'll leave it at
so
that.
Attacking those organic waste is something that chlorine struggles with, right? I mean, we all know that. So if you get something there that can penetrate those biofilms, that can save you a lot of money.
Yeah, awesome. We can't say we do that necessarily, but going after the non-living organics, you're right. It's something that chlorine really struggles with. And the analogy that I give is, if I were a salesperson for your company and every day that I went out, I brought you a new client, like a big client, a new job, like every working day, 5 jobs a week, but I couldn't read or write very well. And I have no idea how to use Excel or anything like that. Would you have me working in your office doing your accounting too? No, but yet that's what the relationship between the strength of chlorine as a sanitizer and disinfectant is. It's that good at killing germs. It's really not made to get rid of sunscreen. It's really not made to get rid of cosmetics and lotions. So, a secondary system like ozone or AOP, those are powerful oxidizers, and they can actually break those things down. Whereas my understanding is UV doesn't oxidize anything, but it's a really good thing at killing. So it can kill germs and all these things. So that the audience knows, I'll be having a manufacturing expert for an ozone company, a UV company, AOP, et cetera, in other videos, so you can hear it from them, because they know a lot more than I do. So does Justin, by the way, but we're going to try to keep this a little generic. So Justin, final topic here on how facilities can save money, because let's be honest, pools typically lose money. I mean, you talked about profitability at the outset, and I totally understand why, because it is very expensive to operate a pool. What are some proactive things? And maybe it's equipment, maybe it's just practices that a lifeguard should be doing. What are some things that you picked up in all of your years since 2005 that you've noticed are like, hey, I like that idea?
Yeah, I think sticking with mechanical, if we have the ability to have redundant systems, that's huge, right? I mean, if a facility has to shut down because a pump goes out and the pump's on back order, or it could be simple as an impeller, right? I mean, it can be something so minor that takes your facility down for 2 days, 3 days, even only a couple hours. Now you've got clientele who is no longer confident that your facility is a facility that they can depend on. And so now maybe they look somewhere else. Maybe they had a bad experience and they're just all over social media and they just vent because your facility is down.
Oh, one unhappy patron. Well, I mean, you almost want them to leave, but the loss of a patron is expensive, but an unhappy one is way more expensive.
Right. So having the ability to do redundancy is awesome. We see a lot of redundancies on the pump side, specifically bigger facilities, and we can also do that with some of the filters and things. I'd also say automation's huge. If you have the ability to automate your facility with a modern chemical controller, getting those alerts from text messages, emails, phone calls, whatever that might be, when one of whatever the variables you're measuring, and that could be everything from a water level in a tank to your water quality, et cetera, to the time a pump's been on, or the RPMs, GPMs, all those things are so important, because again, you enable yourself to stay ahead of your issues, right? If you can be proactive versus reactive, you're going to save a lot of money. More importantly, probably you're going to save time and allow your facility to continue to generate revenue. And when you're looking at a facility that's, let's just say public sector facilities, they're lucky to be 60 to 70% cost recovery, cost effective. You take that down, it's every single day. Kills. On the private sector, even more important, because you're not backed up by the tax base. So any of that thing's huge. On the staffing side, coming up with checklists, coming up with routines, hiring good people, retaining your people. I don't care how well a system is designed. If you're just running through 80 lifeguards at your facility every single summer, and the next summer you have 75 new lifeguards, it's just a recipe for treading water. I mean, you're never going to be able to get ahead of that case. So don't be afraid to pay a little extra on the staffing side if possible, or whatever other benefits structures you can do to help retain people. So people really are, at the end of the day, what makes these things work.
One of the things that I would like to not interject, I'll just add to the end of that list. That's a great list, Justin. Take care of your test kits. Get a good test kit, because I go in pump rooms. I don't know how many hundreds I've been in. I stopped counting after about 300, and I can count it on 2 hands how many ones that were clean. These pump rooms get really messy, and when that happens, an operator's hands are typically dirty, and maybe the viewing dial or the viewing vial gets a little bit smudged, and now you don't get an accurate reading because you can't see it as clearly. keep things clean, keep your test kit operational, keep it calibrated, because if you get wrong test results, you're going to add the wrong amount of chemicals. So Justin, I really appreciate you having on here, and I hope that this helps the audience think about some ways that you can start saving some money and still have a great operating pool that people are happy to be here. This has been Natatorium Knowledge. I'm your host, Eric Knight from Orenda. This is Justin Caron, one of the principals at Aquatic Design Group. I will have a link to his company below if you're interested in design questions or maybe making an upgrade to your facility. Justin, thank you for being with me.